Welcome to Beyond Hormones, the Business of Wellness, the podcast for hormone and functional medicine providers who want a thriving, predictably profitable practice and maybe a little less stress along the way. Hi, I'm your host, Jody Layne, and I've worked with lots of clinics in marketing, sales, and business development, and I have seen what works and what doesn't. And here's what I believe. Hormone and wellness care should be available to everyone who wants it. And while providers know the medicine, many struggle with the business side of their cash practice. And that's where I come in. See, this podcast is here to share real strategies, real stories, things you can implement in your practice right away. So I am so glad you're here. Come on, let's go. Hey there, it's Jody here from Accelerated Medical Practices and the Beyond Hormones podcast. And I've got to tell you, this conversation you're about to hear hit me in all the right ways. You know how sometimes you talk to someone who's been doing this work for a long time and you can just feel the wisdom in every word? Well, that's exactly what it's like talking to Dr. Darren Farnesi. Dr. Farnesi has been running his own hormone and wellness practice in San Diego for almost 2 decades, and he's refreshingly honest about what worked and what didn't, and what he would tell his younger self if he could start all over. We talk about hiring, we talk about burnout, branding, growth, and what it really means to think bigger as a business owner. But the heart of all of it is why he still loves medicine after all these years. If you've ever questioned whether you're doing it right or you're wondering what it really takes to build something that lasts, then pay attention because this episode is going to remind you why you started in the first place. All right, without further ado, let's go meet Dr. Darren Farnesi. Welcome. Hello, Dr. Farnesi. It's so good to see you.
You too,
How are
Jody.
you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. We haven't seen each
Good.
other in like 6 months.
Correct. Yeah, way too long. Way too
Well,
long. Miss you guys.
I miss you too. I miss your whole practice.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you on because you have been doing this a long time. Like you're not a
Yes,
newbie in any way, shape, or form, and you have a lot of experience that I'm hoping you can
correct.
share to help our listeners. So let's just start by, just introduce yourself, your practice, where you're located, and what do you do in the office?
Okay, so we're located in San Diego, California, Hillcrest area, which is kind of uptown from downtown. It's a colorful neighborhood full of restaurants, and it's kind of considered the gay neighborhood of San Diego, although I have more straight friends than gay friends that live here. So it's kind of a fun place. I think there's about over 100 restaurants, so people come here to eat out and go to nightclubs and stuff like that. And we're situated kind of at the gateway, they call it the gateway to Hillcrest. I got really lucky. I bought the building in 2012, and so it's a great location right now. Completely remodeling the gateway to Hillcrest. So literally, our street has been closed for 4 months under construction, which has wreaked havoc with our parking, and that's been a
Yeah.
stressor. But I think ultimately, it's going to be a really beautiful place.
You did great. What do you offer the name of the clinic is Medical Age Management, right?
Medical age management, yes. And, that's something you and I can talk about another time. But, when I started the practice, it was 2006. Bad timing because economic downturn, but I was trying to think of a way, a name that would encompass both aesthetic medicine, which is what I was learning in a fellowship with a dermatologist friend of mine. He convinced me to do a fellowship with him and go into practice with him, learning how to inject fillers and Botox and run his IPL machine and hormone medicine. And so or anti-aging medicine. So I was trying to come up with something that was anti-aging, and I guess I wanted it to be medical because I didn't want to be known as a non-medical facility. I don't know. I didn't want to be like Laser Away down the street
I
or
get that.
something
Mhm.
like that. I wanted it to be a doctor's office. But now sometimes I'm actually considering, maybe changing the name. I don't know. Sometimes people confuse us with a medical management company or something like
Mm.
that. So I'm not so sure how great the name is. I was at a business networking group and somebody else there thought of making the backwards arrows around the word age as part of the logo. So that was kind
Oh,
of
that's
cool because
cute.
we
I like
want
that.
to turn back
Yeah.
age or at least stop aging. So initially, we offered Botox fillers, IPL, and hormone optimization for men and women. But in the course of my evolution, I took lots of fellowships in functional medicine and anti-aging and regenerative medicine. And so I do a little bit of PRP injections and exosome injections, and I do quite a bit of in-depth functional medicine with gut health and immune system health. And I guess I lump food allergies and stuff like that. And probably an area that I don't really do a lot of is chronic fatigue or Lyme disease. I don't really do that so much, but it's funny when you've been in practice 19 years, you start to collect those patients or things happen. And so
They just
we kind of
happen.
offer a smorgasbord of those kind of things.
Yeah. So when you started off, you hormones really wasn't very popular.
No, the funny thing is that my mom went through menopause. So I was in medical school when she started. And so I was learning that you should prescribe Premarin. So this is
Mm.
way back then. And so I told mom to get a prescription for Premarin, and she did what her son said. And she would take a pill and get a headache for 5 days. Her
Oh,
body just totally rejected it. And so back then, bioidentical hormones were kind of really fringe, right? So she found my grandfather was a pharmacist, and he was working with a lady who was a pharmacist also going through menopause. And this lady found, I don't know, some maybe naturopathic doctor in California somewhere. This was in Reno, Nevada, kind of a small town. So over in Sacramento or something, and they started, the two of them, my mom and she, started going over there and getting what was known at the time as the Hargrove formula, which was a liquid form of bioidentical hormones mixed with ethylene glycol, sort of like antifreeze. It was
oh
like a
my
liquid that you rubbed on the
gosh.
skin. But that's how they got through menopause, because
Oh,
Premarin
wow.
didn't work. And so I don't know. So that was kind of interesting. So I was involved in bodybuilding in college and med school. And so I saw a lot of people doing hormones the wrong way. And I always thought it'd be kind of nice to learn how to do them the right way and know what I was doing with them, kind of thing. And then, so I explored a couple anti-aging conferences, which were really small at the time, like a handful of people in a tiny conference room in the hospital or whatever. And I felt like it felt really fringe to me. The people talking were kind of a little weird and a little out there. And so I kind of set it aside and then graduated from residency in family medicine in 2001. And then I worked in clinical trials medicine actually for 6 years. And I really enjoyed being part of the research world, learning about new treatments and stuff. But it was all industry funded or drug company funded. And I saw the two of the things that really bothered me. One was how much of really all medical studies are funded by pharmaceutical companies, number
Hmm.
one. And then how much of medical education is actually funded by these pharmaceutical companies and things like that. Like
Oh,
in other
wow.
words, the money coming through the funding of clinical trials and things like that. And so I would just a little disillusioned by how much our
No
education
kidding.
is kind of skewed. And
Yeah.
so then I was seeing a dermatologist here in Hillcrest, and he became a friend. And I saw that he was having trouble getting a new associate coming out of residency. He just didn't click with most of them. And one day he approached me with the idea of maybe learning to do aesthetic medicine. And I thought, nah, I'm not interested in that. That's all kind of, fluffy vanity kind of stuff. I didn't think that was my thing. But he convinced me to shadow him on Friday. So I took Friday off of work and I shadowed him on Friday. And I actually found that using my hands and injecting was pretty fun, actually. And
You're pretty good at it.
thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I tend to be really detail oriented and
Hmm.
thorough, and so it sort of appeals to me. And it's a little bit like sculpting. I wonder now if I should have been a plastic surgeon or if I should have been an artist. I
Possibly.
mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
But so I ended up continuing to shadow him on Fridays for a year until I had the confidence and the skill set and the malpractice insurance coverage to go ahead and do these procedures. And I opened the practice in the fall of 2006 in his practice because he was only there part-time and he was part-time somewhere else. And it worked for him, it worked for me. But I think we talked about, like who our initial team was. Well, it was me. So
Yeah.
I opened the office, cleaned the office, prepped the charts. did the vital signs on the patients, and I even snuck out a couple times during patient visits to go check my notes because I didn't feel like I, knew
Wow.
everything that I was doing, and I wanted to see,
So let me ask you a question about that. So do you think that a lot of providers would do that?
I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah.
I have maybe I have a problem with wanting to make sure I get it right. So I don't know.
Or you have the drive to make sure it's done right and at whatever cost, which honestly,
Maybe.
entrepreneurs in general, whatever industry they're in, you have to have that drive to be willing to wear every hat at the beginning. So congratulations, and I applaud
Thank
you for
you.
that. That's amazing.
It's kind of funny, and I found myself eventually staying there till like 9 or 10 at night because I was cleaning the office and then prepping the charts for the next day. And then I learned that I actually have to do bookkeeping, so I have
Yeah,
to actually record all these transactions.
right.
And so then I was playing bookkeeper, and then eventually a good patient and friend recommended this guy come in as an employee, part-time as like an office manager, medical assistant answering the phones, and then part-time as an esthetician, maybe
Hmm.
seeing some patients and bringing in some money. And so
That's
we kind of
smart.
started out that way. And then through a networking group, I found a bookkeeper for a while, and she honestly taught me a lot about bookkeeping and using QuickBooks. And I'm sort of self-taught with QuickBooks, but back then I just did it all. I did payroll too. I realized I have to pay myself on payroll with W-2 and do all the taxes.
Right.
So I learned all that stuff. Yeah, so that was the team. It was basically me.
So for somebody that's starting out now and doesn't
Yeah.
have, just like you, like grassroots, no funding, doesn't have the money to hire a team, what did you learn in that time that you could share to a new entrepreneur about how to manage all of that and see patients and do a good job?
It's a good question. I feel like, we're always self-critical. So I know that if I had had the ability to dive 100% into this practice financially, I would have grown it faster. For example, taking out a big loan or doing something where I didn't have to worry about paying the monthly bills. I could have done more business networking, more local lecturing and talking, and just being available in the office for patients. But I didn't do that. I was afraid
Mhm.
of taking out a loan, and
Understood.
so I had another job. I kept doing clinical trials medicine for 2 or 3 days a week. And what it did is I didn't give my full energy to this practice. So it took a long time to build. I always tell people it took 3 years just to get the ball rolling. And I literally mean that. Like, that's a long time. Like,
Mhm.
3 years of doing everything myself pretty much. And getting patients onesies and twosies, at a time until it started to feel like, oh, okay, like this practice is actually a viable thing. Like I could actually take a day or two a week and devote to this because it's actually bringing in money, kind of thing. So, and Dr. Heimer just fee split with me. So I took home 50% of what I brought in, and the 50% went to him, and it allowed me to have no overhead if I didn't have a patient. And you know what I mean? So I wasn't paying rent. So that was
Right.
a really nice situation. And I have done the same thing for my other providers here because when they're starting out, they don't want to pay, $5,000 a month rent or something like that. That's a lot of money. The hesitancy I have about recommending, hey, just take out a big loan and go for it, dive in, is that I think you have to know your market. At the time, I was in economic downturn and asking people to pay cash. I just don't know how fast it'll build. My rule of thumb in most things is it's going to take twice as long and you're going to make half as much. So, just keep that in mind because even though I'm saying, geez, if I sometimes wish I would have just dove in and maybe taken out a loan. I don't know. It was a while before I was making money, so and
Yeah, having a really solid business plan before. I was
yeah,
just talking, I did a podcast with another physician yesterday, and we were talking about this exact same thing. It's crazy about
yeah,
whether or not to get funding or not. And so many practitioners are not used to business planning. And so
no,
without that plan in place, A, they may not be able to get a loan, and B, they don't have the action steps to take to predict their success. And so it is very scary, but there's pros and cons to both. There's no right answer. It's really a matter of whatever
yeah.
works for you.
And you're right. When you say business plan, of course, I think I had a business plan back there. I was pretty good at playing with Excel spreadsheets and kind of mapped out how many patient visits I need and how much I need to charge and stuff. But it really wasn't a business plan in the accelerated medical practice sense. Okay. So it wasn't like, okay, here are the things that you need to commit to doing by this date and this date and this date. And this is what it's going to translate into financially. Because again, we spoke about deadlines, right? If
Right.
I had the fear of, oh my God, I'm not going to pay this loan unless I get out there and I do 5 lectures in the month of August locally to
Right.
talk to patients, and this is what my plan is, and I have to follow the plan. I didn't do that. I
Yeah.
definitely didn't do that. I am so guilty of being like that. I just want to be the good little doctor and put a sign out and everybody will come, right? I think that's what most doctors hope for.
I think so. Yeah,
And
for
and
sure.
and I shared with you earlier, when we were talking that I'm guilty of probably falling back into that about 10 years ago because I did have such a referral business that I feel like I didn't have to work to get new patients anymore. And so for me, that's like a really happy place.
Yeah.
And that's great for me, but it's not really helping the other providers in the practice.
Yeah.
So I think
So,
having an actual business plan laid out by a professional company with experience in this field
mm,
is important. So about 10 years ago, I also hired a consulting company, and I can't even tell you how we ended up. I think I just had my office manager find, several companies and we interviewed them. None of them were good choices. And the mistake I probably made was just picking one when in reality, I should have probably waited until I found the right one. I've done the same thing with employees in the past. That's definitely something I've learned. Just wait until it is actually the right fit. So if I had picked a company like yours who had experience in my field and then laid out a business plan, I probably would have built faster.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
hindsight's 2020. Let's talk
yeah.
about employees for a second, because you and I are on the same page when it comes to that. When
Mhm.
building a culture inside of an office and a practice is so important to the longevity
Yeah.
of the practice, the health of
Yeah.
the practice. So, what are some things that you learned along the way in the 19 years on how to find and keep the right people?
I think probably first 5 to 10 years, I probably had a fear
Mm,
of interviewing and picking employees and a fear of also employee turnover or
mm,
employees leaving. It just was an area of because I don't have a business degree. I had never owned a business before. So it's an area of complete ignorance for me, like, how to hire an employee, how to
mm.
find, you know what I mean? So I did, I advertised on Craigslist and Indeed and, those types of things. But be out of, I guess, ignorance or lack of experience, I went ahead and hired 1 out of 5 candidates maybe that we interviewed when I should have just actually waited to meet the person where I didn't have a couple of those gut feeling hesitations. One thing I've learned is that gut feeling generally tells, at least for me, tells me no. It doesn't often tell me yes, but it will give me a no. And if there's some no's, I probably should have just moved on. I think the reason I didn't partly is because I'm such a perfectionist that I've also learned that if I wait for perfection, it may never happen also.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So, and I think I'm still trying to learn how to balance that. I mean, I have a great staff now, but they're definitely not perfect. So one of my things of learning is, learning how to be joyous and grateful for someone who gets it like 90% right and maybe that their heart's in the right place. I've been doing some studying lately on brand and the importance of brand and brand words and brand meanings, and really thinking about not having anybody here that's off brand
Mm.
or seeking people that are off brand. I don't know. I'm still learning a lot about that, to be honest.
I think the fear of scarcity when
Yeah.
you try to stay on brand. When we started Accelerated Medical Practices, that was the big conversation. Do we just focus on hormone clinics, which is obviously our background, or do we expand to all cash pay practices? And my brain was screaming at me, no, all cash pay. It's a bigger audience. But the
Yeah.
truth is, what you're saying is so true. Being on brand, being niche, you're much better off being successful in a small pool than mildly successful in a large pool. So I think
Yeah.
that your thinking is right on.
I mean, along those lines, I also sometimes think we do too much. I mean, I have transient thoughts of narrowing my practice actually,
Hmm.
because I started doing, basically everything that I felt like I was interested in, and the practice kind of grew organically out of that. You get a patient in who is into hormones and life hacking and longevity. And no surprise, they usually work out, go to the gym, whatever, and then they have a musculoskeletal injury. And you think, well, I could do some PRP on that, or I could inject it with exosome. And sometimes I had even thought about opening a gym or having a personal trainer here or whatever. But nowadays, I've almost found myself saying no. Like, I am so booked already and busy. For example, my nurse practitioner is pretty good at thread lifting, the little PDO threads. And I think I could be probably really good at that, but I'm just not going to do it. I'm going
Good
to
for you.
let that be his thing. I'm also letting the laser be his thing and Dr. Koenig, because I can't be an expert at all that. And I have had transient thoughts of even no longer doing anything in the aesthetic world and just focusing on functional medicine and hormones. But I know a lot of patients would be disappointed because they like my little thorough techniques with Botox and fillers. So maybe I just keep doing that. But it's hard, then you have to actually keep up in the field. And I can guarantee that if someone's out there doing only aesthetic dermatology, like literally only, like say they're doing only Botox and fillers in a niche med spa somewhere, and they're willing to study and keep up in their field, several times a year or whatever, they're probably doing better than me because I'm also putting energy into hormone medicine and
Right.
functional medicine and stuff like that. And so I worry about that. I worry about staying up in all these areas. It's kind of hard.
Yeah, it's the challenge of loving to learn. That's the one
I
thing
do.
I've really realized about you. You love to learn.
I do.
And
Yeah.
so you not just, so some people go wide, some people go deep. You do both.
Yeah, yeah, which is probably one of the reasons I'm not doing a good job with the quote unquote
Sleeping?
work-life balance. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so I think a lot about that. I really
Yeah.
do. Like looking forward, like what am I going to really have time for in terms of continuing education? Or because you're right, I do love learning. And it's funny, I feel somewhat cheated by the fact that life is so short because if I had
Mm.
the wisdom I have now,
Ugh.
19 years ago, I mean, if you'd asked me some of these questions 19 years ago, I wouldn't have answers to them. But now I'm reflecting on I'm teaching a lot to the nurse practitioner and to Dr. Koenig and to the staff. And I'm thinking, and I teach patients all day long. I'm thinking, well, maybe I never thought I'd be interested whatsoever in teaching. Teaching to me is like, oh my God, I got to come up with a slide set and stand in front of a lecture hall and tell people stuff that they might know better than me. And I'm like, and so now I'm finding that I actually kind of enjoy that. And I could actually see a role where I do more steering of the ship and less direct patient care. And actually, I'm the guy out there learning the new techniques and learning the new medicine and teaching the providers here and kind of keeping our practice up to date. But it's hard to do both.
Absolutely. What you're speaking about is definitely the way education's going. So
Yeah,
it's no longer the traditional methods, more and more courses, online courses being taught by just people who have the knowledge and charging a nominal fee because you can produce it once and then multiple people can buy it. So you can make
yeah,
money. People can
yeah.
get the access to knowledge at a much reduced cost. It take little bits from different people. Like I definitely see in the hormone industry, there being a movement for more of you experienced hormone clinicians and longevity clinicians teaching the younger ones. I could see that.
That's such a great idea. And Jody,
I shouldn't have told you that because now you're going to add one more thing to your list of things
no,
to
I
do.
know, but I really want to do that because I'm going to ask for your help to do this because I don't have naturally that entrepreneurial thinking, but I recognize, and I've heard it 20 times in lectures about how to grow your business, how to expand your scope for 19 years I've heard this. And do something that's reproducible that doesn't require you to make money at it. And I call those pots of money, and I don't have enough of
Hmm.
those. And I would like to develop those. I really would. And you're right, I probably could. And I never thought of that as I could share so much knowledge that people are getting from taking big courses, but maybe like little snippets, lower
Yeah.
price range, and it just offered on the internet. I also could do it for patients too, because I do it all day long. And it's a
Yeah.
matter of doing like what we're doing today. Again, you know me, I'm always telling you that and this is, I think, the struggle of a clinician that's in the trenches. I am so focused on 100% as thorough and perfect patient care that I can give. And then, of course, the fear of covering the overhead and paying for things and making the business run, that I don't often have spare time and energy to put into these ideas. But if I took the time to do
Right.
them, it
Right.
would make sense. So,
Yeah. You need a like a schedule, like an executive assistant to just manage your life. Wouldn't that be great?
yeah, it would
We
be great.
could share that person.
Yeah, well, yeah, that'd be great. And Gil is kind of trying to be that person for me, but if we scheduled this, like if I
Yeah.
spoke to you or Gil or someone here about all the things that I teach patients all day long
Just
and made
recorded it.
videos of them,
Yeah.
it could be like a revenue stream for me too, you
All
know?
right, we'll talk about that offline.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. You've done a lot. You're very good at recognizing where you did well, where you could have made different improvements. What would you say that so that you can help to teach those that are listening? What is the biggest mistake you've made over the last 19 years in terms of the business growth?
Okay. So we already talked about hiring the wrong employees, so we'll put that aside. But I'd say business growth is probably not thinking big,
Okay.
like
Not having a vision.
yeah, like business growth, what's that? To me, that was just, waiting for more patients to come in. I'm not realizing that I only have so much capacity to work eight
Yeah.
hours a day. And then, what you said, the second thing that something else came to mind. I'm trying to think of what it is now. Not just thinking big. I think maybe making the mistake of not realizing that growth and marketing is an important thing to keep doing, even though I feel like I have a full schedule already. You know what I mean?
Yeah, your practice is fairly large. How many providers do you have?
Just, well, there's Andrew, the counselor. I don't know if he counts. And then we have an esthetician, and then we have a nurse practitioner and Dr. Koenig. So if you count all of those people, I guess it's five, including
Yeah,
me.
so five scheduled that need to be filled with people, whether they are or whatever service that they're getting. So yeah, so
Yeah.
marketing on a consistent basis to keep everyone's schedule full is important.
I think another mistake so in terms of business growth, I would say not continuing to do the things that make it grow because I was comfortable, not thinking big. I think the limits we put in our own mind, any of us can do anything we want to. I could have five clinics if I really wanted to, go
Mhm.
for that, but I never thought that way. I also think continuing to do um, outreach, community outreach, business networking, I feel like I don't have any time for that anymore. Another one is undervaluing myself. I probably give more thorough care than most doctors out there, and I prepare for visits and I study and I anticipate questions they might ask, and I do research before you even come in. If it was an attorney fee, it would be a $2,000 visit because of all the prep work I do. Because I am shocked when I go on these business roundtable discussions. There are people that just started last year and they started with a business model that was more kind to them in terms of their work-life balance. And they're already like, busy. I'm like, how the hell did they do that? Of course, maybe it was different 19 years ago, but oh my gosh, I feel embarrassed and kind of dumb, sometimes.
I do, I'm going to tell on you a little bit, but I think it's a good learning lesson. As you stated, you take care of your patients in a very high level CEO type level, C-level type of service
Hmm.
where like
Yeah.
somebody that you are taking care of really could be spending 15, $20,000 a year with you with the amount of time and energy you put into not just face to face, but everything vaccines. But yet your business model is still very normal, which is, pay for
Yeah.
service and all
Right.
that stuff. So,
Right.
it's hard to
Yeah.
choose. And we talked about this before, like even you don't want to have your business model be different than the rest of your practitioners. There's a lot of deciding, when it comes to
Yeah.
picking exactly what your business model is and then sticking to it.
Well, I've always told you when we've talked, I've been thinking about having a membership-based practice for 19 years and I've never done it. I literally have been thinking about it.
Ah!
I know it's ridiculous. And
Yeah,
part of it, I think, is just being confident to value yourself for what you actually are giving people.
yeah,
And it took a while probably for me to have that confidence. And I don't know, I guess each of us has a different journey, but for me, now I'm coming from a pretty good position of confidence. I realize now that most of these patients are not going to want to lose me no matter what. And I have a good base. And so I don't have to worry about filling the practice. So now I can maybe think about changes.
yeah.
And you mentioned it too. 19 years ago, a membership model wasn't the big thing either. In fact, when we learned all these things educationally, nobody taught us anything about a business model. I just kind of talked to a bunch of naturopaths and saw what they were
Hmm.
charging, and okay, I'll do that. I think we started out at like $200 a visit or something like that. And of course, money went a lot further. Another big mistake we talked about, well, wait, I think we already talked about is hiring the wrong people. Of course, I thought of something else, but now I can't think of it. I'm sorry. Maybe it'll come to me when we keep talking. But you mentioned in terms of business growth.
Let's switch from the things you did wrong to tell us
Yeah.
something that you did right. Like, what's something that you did that you're like, thank goodness I did this because this really helped this practice grow?
Okay, well, for sure, in terms of different types of marketing, the most fruitful has always been relationships.
Hmm.
So, getting out in the community and meeting people, joining local chambers of commerce and business networking groups, and actually showing up and just meeting people because then people start to trust you and know you, and they might not see you, but somebody might ask them. And so I think that's way more fruitful than writing a big glossy ad. There was a local company here that was similar to Groupon, but it was just here in the Hillcrest community. And I ended up doing, I think, probably 45 free laser hair removals for the upper lip, and only one of those patients actually ever became a real patient, and she probably spent a total of like $1,000 over the course of 10 years. So it was so not worth it. I did some big glossy ads and big fancy high-end magazine targeting high income, high net worth individuals. Did nothing for me, but the networking that actually happened to come along with that, where I was invited to opening day at the polo fields and the horse races, and we did some big events downtown. I ended up meeting a lot of people that were high net worth people that have become my clients. So that was, the networking was really the
Right.
thing. I did write articles for a lot of local newspapers, and that went along with the networking. So when people saw
Yeah.
me at a local business networking event, they're, oh, I saw your article in the local newspaper for Hillcrest, then they knew who I was or whatever. So
You're
donated my
pointing to,
time too. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. You're pointing to a lot of really important things. One is that when it comes to medicine, it really is about two things, and it's education and trust. If a patient walks through the door, sit down for the first time, and they trust you and they understand what this medicine can do for them, it's a no-brainer. Like, why would
Yeah,
anybody not do it?
that's true. Yeah.
And the second thing you're pointing to is
Yeah.
that marketing is not a linear thing anymore. It used to be when I first started in marketing, it was direct mail. It was like I could tell you exactly how much money you were going to make from one direct mail piece and a formula. It's
Wow.
not
Wow.
that way anymore. Now it's very synergistic. So you do have to do the glossy ad and go to the event and then write the article and be on social media. And when you start popping up everywhere, people are like, oh, well, everybody must be going to medical age management. I should
Right,
totally
right,
be there.
right, right. And it does, I did learn that early on that it was the number of impressions that you make, right?
Hmm.
And so again, I was afraid to spend a lot of money, and I
Sure.
wonder if I was penny wise and pound foolish with the amount that I spent on either Google ads or glossy ads, because if there were those pop-ups here, 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 and here, and then I showed up at events or whatever, it probably would have been better. So I was definitely maybe too frugal in my spend for marketing in the beginning, not really feeling comfortable with the idea of a big upfront investment for a future payoff kind of thing. So yeah, no, it is interesting. Yeah, who knows? I think for a lot of people starting out, it sort of depends on your personality. One of the questions we talked about was, do I join another practice or do I start my own? And I thought that that was a really interesting question because I'm still figuring it out after 19 years. And so if somebody can join a practice that they really resonate with, and those people have already figured it out, like that, a lot of stuff. If you have a great high tolerance for stress and being DIY and figuring it all out from the beginning, then go for it. But man, it's the hardest thing I ever did, and I don't want to do it again.
I don't think you need to.
Yeah.
So, because we talk about so many things about this business that are hard, I always like to ask whoever's on the show, can you share with us a story about a patient? Don't use names, but
Okay.
a story about a patient that you helped that you still like speaks to your soul.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of them. That's the thing that sustains you, right? So there were years that went by where I really wasn't making that much money in this practice, but that's what kept me going, right? Is the smiles leaving the clinic. In the original clinic over on Fourth Avenue, when I was sharing with Dr. Heimer, I had a lady show up one day. I think she might have been seeing Dr. Heimer for maybe Botox or something, but her husband brought her because we have 3 steps to get into the little old house where I was, and she couldn't get up the steps herself without his help because she was so crippled with arthritic pain. So this is an extreme case, and so she had been to every rheumatologist in the county and had swore that she had rheumatoid arthritis or something going on, and she just couldn't figure it out. And so her last resort basically was, okay, like, what can you do for me? Is it a functional medicine thing or is it a hormone thing? We fixed her hormones and literally all of that pain went away. And
Oh my
it
gosh.
was the most dramatic effect of estrogen that I've ever seen. And to this day, she's still a patient of mine. And if something happens and she runs out of estrogen, she knows that her whole body starts hurting. And I just had another patient come in the other day that said that he's so this is an esoteric topic, but he's a prostate cancer patient, and we've convinced his urologist, because his urologist is way up on all the literature, to put him on high doses of estrogen, and
Mhm.
it's taken away all of his joint aches and pains as well. So it's kind of an interesting idea. I had another guy that's son. My very first patient is a good friend of my mom's, and she sent me her son, who was just the classic, almost kind of train wreck, right? He was obese, diabetic, had myasthenia gravis, super insecure, hadn't dated anyone in years, just really kind of going down the tubes. And we fixed his hormones and coached him on lifestyle practices. And he's now discovered weight training. He's a champion of fasting. He's confident enough. He started dating a lady. They just got married last year, and now they're having a kid. And his whole life has changed. And so when I see him, it's just like, he's so grateful. And it's like, oh my gosh, all I'm doing is just practicing medicine I know, and these people think, oh my God, you saved my life or whatever.
Well, because you did. What I mean, you did. I mean, I get your humbleness and I appreciate your humbleness, but think about, oh my God, that story of that woman. Like she just probably just assumed this was it for the rest of my life. I'm just gonna
Yeah,
need
yeah, yeah.
assistance.
I
And
don't
it
know
was a
why. Yeah,
hormone.
it was horrible. Yeah. And she's to this day very sensitive. Like she's the Goldilocks person. So if we get a little bit too much estrogen, she gets agitated and overstimulated. A little bit too little, and she gets joint aches and pains. And so it's fascinating. You get the chance to do Good medicine. I think the number one thing for me is, I was obviously involved in family medicine. I worked in primary care clinics for the military and UCSD and Kaiser, and we had the 15-minute or the 10-minute office visits, and you had to do all the documentation and everything in that amount of time. And for me, that just wasn't practicing good medicine. And so the most wonderful gift is having a practice that you can practice medicine the way that you think is the right medicine. So the one thing I can say is that I sleep at night not worrying about whether I did everything that I could do for each patient each day. And sometimes that means I run overtime in the visit, but I just think this is the way medicine should be practiced. I think you need to listen and have time to listen. And if you listen well enough, the patients will tell you what they need. And that's probably the most incredible gift. Disillusioned with the stresses of running a business or managing a staff, I realized that I answer to no one. I don't answer to insurance companies. Nobody tells me how to practice. And I practice the way I think medicine should be practiced. And obviously, a lot of patients like it that way.
People
That's the
don't
thing we
like
have
you.
to remind ourselves of. I mean, I do set my schedule. I get
Yeah.
to take time off when I want, and
Yeah.
I practice the way I want. And I call it relationship medicine. I know we've
Yeah.
talked about that
Yeah.
before. We really value that deep connection with people and doing it right. You asked about decisions that you made that were also pivotal. For whatever reason, my style is, and I have done this from day one, is I prep for the visit.
Hmm.
So I review the notes that you and I went over last time, and I pre-ask or pre-write questions that I want to intend
Hmm.
to ask. I've spent years designing forms that prompt me to ask all the pertinent functional medicine questions. If I know you're going to ask about something on your labs that I'm not an expert at, I research it beforehand. And so when I sit down with a patient, they really feel like I know them and that I remember our last visit and that I'm not just kind of scrambling through things, at the last minute and coming up with stuff. And so I think that has set me apart from
Yeah.
a lot of practices. I do have colleagues that don't do that and they look at me like cross-eyed, like, are you crazy? And, and it's probably one of the reasons I don't have enough sleep and I don't, I work too much and it's because I do that, but I actually can't undo that. I feel like then I'm not practicing good medicine. So,
Awesome. I could sit here and talk to you forever, but I've taken up so much of your time. I know how busy you are. I have one last question. So
okay.
I don't know if you ever listened to this podcast, The Diary of a CEO, but it's
No, I haven't.
one of
No.
my favorites. Steve
Okay,
Bartlett, I
good.
totally stole this from him.
Okay.
What he does is he asks the last guest to ask a question for the next guest, but that guest doesn't know who is getting asked the question. And you are not going to know who asked the question. And you don't know this yet. This is new.
Okay.
Okay.
Interesting. Wow.
So this was asked yesterday by the person I interviewed yesterday.
Okay.
So what is the most important lesson you would like to teach your younger self?
Ooh. Wow. I think probably the first thing that comes to mind is that the limits you have on what you can do are all here.
Mhm.
So don't limit yourself. Don't, change the conversation. The dialogue that we have here is really what sets the limits. And I think probably didn't think big or anything like that. I think that's the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that. If I could teach my younger self to think big and not limit and, believe that anything's possible. And of course, I'd also like to send my younger self to business school because there's a lot of that stuff that I've had to learn the hard way.
I get that. I really do. I get that. Dr.
Yeah,
Farnesi, thank you so much. This has
you're
been one
welcome.
of the best shows I've done so far. I love
Oh,
talking
cool.
to you. You're a
Thanks.
wealth of knowledge, and I know that the listeners got a lot of value from being here today with you.
Okay, great. Well, good. Thank you. That makes me happy. Then maybe we can help someone. Yes.
Definitely. All right.
Cool.
Well, I will see you
Yeah.
soon.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Beyond Hormones, the business of wellness. I hope that you're walking away with fresh ideas and real strategies you can use to grow your practice with profit and purpose. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the show so you never miss a conversation. And if something you heard today resonated with you, do me a favor, share this episode with a friend or a colleague. It's one of the best ways you can support the show, and it might be exactly what they need to hear right now. If you want even more tools and support, go ahead and head over to acceleratedmedicalpractices.com. Until next time, keep doing the work that matters. Your patients need you, and I am cheering you along every step of the way.